All right.
We're back. We're back. It's always good to see you.
It is
Giant
good to
face
see
floating among the stars there.
you. You bet. It's one of my favorite places to be out amongst the stars.
Perpetually. Ah, my friend.
Yeah, things going well.
Things are going very well. In fact, I was over in, well, I was at UCLA last Friday night,
Oh, really?
spontaneously.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't planned. Let me fill you in real quick. Stuff going on. I have an event tomorrow night. By the way, are you busy tomorrow night? I know it's last minute, but I have an event. I think I have a room. If you're not busy tomorrow night, you're invited. If you are busy or if you don't want to come, it's fine.
No, I normally I would. My daughter's in town and she leaves to go back to college on the next day. So tomorrow night is a family night. So
Okay. Um, we're full anyway. I would have
okay.
turned
All
you
right.
away at the door. No. So I put on the calendar. I can't let another year go by without doing something important on March 15th, the Ides of March, but I
Okay.
now call it Solomon Tehlirian Day.
All
It's the
right.
day he shot and killed Talat Pasha and then was
Oh, really?
arrested.
I
He,
didn't
he
know.
was arrested, thrown in jail. 10 weeks later, on June 3rd, he was acquitted and freed. And so tomorrow is the 104th anniversary of that event.
Wow.
So I locked in the I'm not going to say it here, the name here, because I
Okay.
have I have a troll that kind of follows along, and I'll tell you afterwards. But I have an iconic historian that's at UCLA,
Nice.
and last Friday, my main historian out of Georgetown was in town, and he wanted to have dinner, and I'm like, hey. Let's grab a bite, and whenever he comes into town, I want to introduce him to some other people that I've been working with on the
Okay.
project, and so I put some feelers out, and this other historian out of UCLA says, "Hey, there's an event going on at UCLA. You should come." And I told my other historian from Georgetown, he's like, "Oh, I'm at UCLA right now." So I went to UCLA last Friday night, listened to this one lecture that's right at the heart of what I'm doing, factual history versus storytelling and truth and stuff like that. I'm like, this is amazing. And then we got invited over to the professor's home who was hosting the thing. So I was hobnobbing with like these elite muckety mucks in the art history department over at UCLA.
Nice.
So, and they were all happy meeting me and learning what I'm doing. So I was in your neck of the woods. I was on your stomping grounds last Friday.
Well, that's
And then
exciting. I will say, if you ever end up being over there, I was over at UCLA last Friday, and if I didn't, we might have been able to connect up. So feel free to let me know when you're going. So
that I will try and remember that now because uh, you might have been enjoyed this. Anyway, it
no,
was in the evening. It wasn't
sounds
during the
like a
day.
fun evening though. That's there's part of me that loves being able to do stuff like that because I just get exposed to stuff that it would take me so long to research and understand, and being able to talk to people who are experts in it is just
Right.
that's a fascinating
It's
prospect.
concentrated
Yeah.
educational experience. Plus, the guy who was hosting the dinner afterwards took us into a study and started pulling rare books off the shelf. He's showing off his passion, his collection. And one of the
Oh,
historians that's my friend is a rare book specialist. So it was
oh
like
wow.
everybody's like, no way. And they're turning these pages and like, where'd you get this? You spent how much? Ooh, you smuggled that out of the country? Yeah, if they knew they would, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Oh, that's
So,
fun.
anyway, none of that has anything to do with our topic today. So, we're going to run out of time.
Oh,
Jeff, I want to talk about what you suggest these topics, and I want to jump to this second one that's in the title Leaps in Quantum Computing.
all right.
That actually very much interests me. Um, so I'm going to turn it over to you to tell me what's going on. What are the implications? What's happened, and what are the projections?
Well, that's a great question, and what I have found is that I've kind of been watching this quantum computing from an outsider perspective. It's like, I like looking at computers, and it's been an interesting journey for me because I started working with computers back in the, I mean, I had one at home, that was back in the mid '80s, which was a little unusual for the time, but it was a word processor that could play a couple of games. That's what it
Yeah,
amounted
right.
to. You couldn't do much beyond that.
Pong, right?
Oh no, we were above Pong. We had this
Oh,
one
okay.
called Spelunker, where you rocked down through a cave and had to get energy pellets, and it was a pretty fun game. But when I was in undergrad, one of the tasks I was assigned was to buy a new computer for our lab. And so I went out and was researching. And this is back in the days of the 486s. We actually got 2 megabytes of RAM in this thing, and that was
I remember
huge.
when 4 megs came out, I was like, what? Four
I
megs?
know,
No way. You'll
80,
never
80
need
meg.
any more memory.
I know. How could you possibly 80 megabytes of hard drive? I mean, how could you possibly? What's funny is that I've done this exercise. It's like that computer was a mega, or a couple of megs of RAM, 80 megabyte hard drive, a high clock processor. I think it was somewhere up in the megahertz, 100 megahertz range. It was about $2,000. 15-inch monitor. And now I look at that, it's like every single one of those components is at least 10 times faster, except that the cost is now 10 times less. So I could buy a 10 times faster computer, more hard drive, better monitor for a tenth the price. And this is like 20 years ago, I could still do this. So it's just amazing how much the computer technology is advanced. But what was interesting
This
in that,
thing, man.
no, even more so, yes, that in the midst of doing that, at some point, people kept making faster and faster computers, and they realized nobody has any technology there's really not a popular use for this, because there's only so fast you need to run a word processor, or even some of the games at the time. And I realized games have advanced and everything, but that general use had changed. And so what I see in that was what people were saying, hey, can we build better computers so that we can run faster programs? Now it's branched out into, we're putting it on our phone and we're doing social media. There's this whole branch of stuff that people couldn't even imagine. And if I'm
Right.
candid, that's the part of this that I'm a little bit concerned, or I'll even be honest, I'm worried about, because I think you could make an argument that social media may be a net lose for society, in that you can connect and do certain things, but at the other side, you might have lost our ability to relate and think and reason well, and so it's some of that maturity that we need to use it well, the technology may have diminished. But that's what's going on with quantum computers. Is in principle, these computers, as we develop them, could be much more powerful than the classical computers we operate today. And we're starting to put them together in a way, at least in certain scenarios, sometimes these quantum computers actually do outperform what you could do with our classical computers. The particular one, oh, good grief. It's D-Wave built it. It was a computer that could do this particular task of figuring out how solids crystallize, go through phase transitions, and they could do it in two-dimensional space and three-dimensional and n-dimensional space, which really doesn't matter for the real world in some sense, because we live in 3 dimensions and classical computers could do about as well. But the quantum computer could do it in a way more general, far more powerful. I think they said it'd take millions of years for a standard computer to do it. So
Hmm.
there are at least these scenarios where these quantum computers are just so much better in the tasks they can do. But it's a lot more complicated of whether they're actually better and can you build them and stuff. But this is kind of the technology I thought was just interesting to talk about today.
It's I guess, a innate human characteristic to, why do a thing? Because we can, or let's see if we can, right? That's just simple. Let's see if we can, right? And
Yeah, that's true.
and I was going to go on a tangent, but I'm going to refrain.
Okay.
But that's a God designed thing, right? God has placed in us the drive to pursue, and men and women are different, but we each have our proclivities and our tendencies and our strengths, and I hear you. I hear your fear,
Mm-hmm.
your and rightly so. I mean, we have seen the great abuses of technology, and I of late, we Oppenheimer, right? The fear,
Yes.
the deal Oppenheimer had to face this, right? He was contracted to do a thing because he was good at a thing, and the thing that he was good at was like, well, should we do it? And I guess the rationale is, if we don't, they will. It's inevitability. They're gonna do it, so we should probably be first at it. And so the morality of dropping those bombs, it's like, I used to kind of be with the argument, that it was necessary,
Mm-hmm.
but that's, very limited government propaganda. Here's the justification for it. Now I'm like, I mean, if it hadn't happened, nobody would have seen the power of the thing, or they wouldn't have
Yeah.
understood the power of the thing. But dropping it on those cities,
Mhm.
when the Japanese were in negotiations already to end the war, or as my understanding is, that's the
Yeah.
facts that have come out. And so it was more of a demonstration of power to kill those people. So that's what you're talking about, right?
Well, it is, and there's a little there. I think I'm less concerned about that because the suddenness of it. I mean, there was I think a documentary slash docudrama that I watched called Out of the Ashes, which kind of detail or followed the stories of 5 or 6 different people who were actually their real life stories, and so I'm not sure how much it was based on a true story and actually a true story, so I'll do that. But there was this one kind of poignant scene at the end where there was a couple of American soldiers that were in prison in a Japanese prison. They escaped during this right around the time I mean, within hours of when the bomb was dropped, and one of these Japanese guards found them as they were escaping, and he actually brings them up to see the blast site, and his comment was, I want people to see what happened here, so he wanted people to know. And there's part of that where the rapidity of how quickly that happened allowed people to see what the consequences could be so they could make a choice. Whereas, with some of this technology, I mean, you look at, social media. 20 years ago, nobody even thought about social media. Now we're in a world where you couldn't imagine living without social media. And it kind of happened slowly enough that it just became part of what we did, but it also not so quickly that you could see the consequences of it. So it kind of developed slowly and quickly. And I don't even exactly know how to describe that, but where the technology advanced quickly, that it got integrated, but we didn't have a chance to think, do we really want to do this? And, kind of to your point, it was 70 plus years, well, on the order of 70 years since the last time we used an atomic weapon in any sort of conflict. So we did kind of learn a lesson from that, and it's changed the way we did things.
Right. And, the biblical, all things work together for good, right? Even things that look
Mm-hmm.
horrific, God is using for good. And um, so we could go in a bunch of different directions on this, but it's really about who's in charge of the technology, right? I mean, technology is instrumental, has
Mm-hmm.
instrumental value, the inventions,
Yeah.
etc. And so it's who is using it. Uh, a deadly or dangerous or destructive technology in the hands of a good person can be used for good. But
Yeah.
so we've seen tech, what's the term, technocrats, or a tech oligarchy.
Mm.
With the advancement of technology and big business and global interconnectedness, there are entities now that transcend governments, right? They're entities that, you
Yeah.
know, Google, Apple, these trillion-dollar companies that have power and influence and so do we want this technology in the hands of some, like, they're not
Yeah.
voted in, they're not elected, they're just a private corporation, they get to make these decisions that have global impact,
Yeah.
potential global impact. And so I that's where the fear lies, right? In whose hands is
Right.
it in?
Well, and honestly, there's a part of me that looks beyond. It's like, nothing about I look through scripture and there's nothing in there that says, hey, live this way and you're going to enjoy a good life. And good life meaning things are comfortable and the world works well. I mean, Christianity has actually flourished a lot of times where things have been poor, because I think partially because it has such a message. It's such a message of hope at its core and its foundation. So I'm not, at some level, my major concern isn't, what is the world going to do with it? I kind of have somewhat shifted my focus to, okay, as a church, how do we deal with this? Because that's the thing I can actually do something about. I don't get to, there's nothing in the
Right.
world I could do to control whether quantum technology is going to be developed and whether it will break all encryption and these sorts of things. It's just beyond my control to do that. But I can ask the question, okay, given this technology is out there, how do I live wisely in this world? Scripture calls us, do not be unwise, but be aware of the times, live wisely. And I hate that I'm misquoting one of my favorite verses right there. And so I was typing a message the other day, and I can't even remember what it was, but I remember typing in there, and I got every other letter that I typed was right, but yet I looked back down at my phone, and my phone said GIF, capital GIF, instead of God. I'm like, is autocorrect not letting me type God here, or making it more sensitive so that if I don't get it exactly right, it wouldn't surprise me that these sorts of things are going on. And I don't want to be just, there's a demon behind every bush, but I don't want to be naive to recognize these things aren't there. And so,
Okay, it's not
how
just
do I
me. It's
use
not
these
just me that
technologies well? Yeah.
I'm
Huh?
thinking the same way. That kind of stuff. I'm like, wait a minute. Not that there's a person, not that they have, not that they have the manpower to monitor each individual, but there are programs and algorithms that they can,
Yeah.
launch into. It's like, let's default to these things, that
Right.
are opposed or not what the person is seeking and pursuing. And those little things can incrementally push us in directions and influence us
Yeah.
potentially.
Well, and I mean, just to put that on a little bigger scale, like, oh wow, he's just worried about this little thing. Well, now think what's happened with our search engine. You used to go in there, type something, it would give you websites based on some measure of relevance of what was going on. Well, now the first thing you get when Google comes up is this AI that has summarized what's going on. Now take this little odd feature. Let's just say it's actually somebody's designed it in there to say, let's change, let's minimize how much God is there. That's got to show up in the summaries that come up too. And so I can't disregard how useful looking at some of those summaries are, but I am naive if I don't recognize there is a bias in the way those are being produced. And if I don't understand that, I'm going to be misled. Or if I just take that as, oh, that's what I want to know, that has real world consequences to those sorts of things. And how do I not only prepare myself, but how others be prepared for that as well?
And consequences that we aren't fully aware of, we can't
Sure.
possibly be
Yeah.
fully aware of until a generation has passed. Like Chat GPT is going to write a whole lot of term papers from now on, right? From now on, and which means the analytical process, the processes of coming up, of producing the information and putting your thoughts together in a coherent
Right.
thesis, that those skill sets are going to diminish for the people that resort to that, right? And
Yeah.
how is that going to affect? Well, all right, let's
So,
move on to the other topic, because
yeah.
I could go on this forever, but the other topic
Yeah.
does interest me. So every so often the news, the science news, or the science media will grab a thing and extrapolate and do a sensational headline: life
Hmm.
discovered, or another habitable planet. There's plenty of them out there, right? They
Right.
just they take one factor. It's in the Goldilocks zone, and there's a possibility of liquid water. There's life out there, right? Those kinds of things. Tell
No,
me.
yeah, no, that's actually funny because this particular discovery, ha I would see that in the past, and in fact, this has kind of happened because there was a meteorite that was discovered in in Antarctica, Allen Hills 84001. Love the name on, or it's ALH 84001. And the reason why I know that is because it was discovered in Allen Hills. That's what the ALH stands for. It was discovered in 1984, and it was the first one discovered. So there's actually a reason for a lot of these names, which once you get, it's very
You are such a
instructive.
nerd. I love
You
you,
think
man.
so?
I love you so much.
Well, it allows me to make fun of the naming because it's like,
Uh-huh.
wow, we're so uncreative. But it's like, once you know it, it's really instructive at the same time.
Thank you.
And so, so there's, there were things that they found in there that said, oh, certainly this is a sign of life. I remember this was back during the Clinton presidency that this all came out as, oh, we found life. And it turns out, I don't think there are probably still people who think that's signs of life, but it seems like the consensus is these were probably abiotic processes. Well, there's the Perseverance Explorer rover that's on Mars. It was landed, I think, in 2021. It landed in this big crater, the Jezero crater, which presumably was an ancient lake that was filled up with water at some point in time. It was exploring this region and actually drove up into one of these channels that looks like a river flowing into it, and it found this rock that has black marks in it that if you found that rock on Earth, those black marks are the remnants or they're features that are that happen in the rock because life facilitates those features. And so they're thinking, hey, this might well be a sign of life here. And, what I've found amusing is given all of what you're saying, they're like, well, we've seen this in the past. We're being a little more cautious here and everything. So there's a recognition that the over sensationalization has happened, and they seem to be a lot more circumspect. Exciting prospect, but nonetheless, let's wait here until we've analyzed it well.
Enough crying wolf. Right? It's like, we found life, we found life, we found life. Nope, we found life. Nope, we found life. And it's, I mean, there's a mindset in your domain of science that, some people are resolved that there must be life out there because it exists here. This can't be the only place, and the age of the universe, the size of the universe, and all the, there's plenty of other opportunities for it to have happened elsewhere. So those going in with those presuppositions, and so they, every one of these things probably further, validates, even though, they'll just default to, I think it is a sign of life, and maybe that's not good science as long as they, well,
so this does kind of there's a little bit of intersection between your field and my field here, in that the more you can move the public, the more supportive that they are of doing science, of generating funding. The reality of it is science doesn't happen if people don't support it somehow.
Yep.
And so the prospect of life out there is pretty exciting. I mean, we wouldn't have so many movies where you talk about life being out there if that weren't the case. But it does seem like there's a sensationalization works for a while. And at some point, people get a little cynical if you're not careful. And I mean, that's got to be recognized in your industry, because that's kind of what you're building things to draw on people's emotions. That's a key feature of communicating well in some sense.
Yeah, and guilty. Well, with great power comes great responsibility, right? That, and being in the media or having control of the microphone, basically, when you work in the media, you there's that balance, or that decision. Am I just here to inform, or am I here to influence? Right? Am I here to just tell people what's going on and be as unbiased, or I have this power, I can use this power for good, I'm going to push the narrative, I'm going to read into and come to conclusions and promote certain conclusions as opposed to other conclusions, etc. And so That, and the caution in Timothy is, not many of you should be teachers. Beware to be
Yeah.
teachers. You'll be judged more severely, and that is that caution, because
Mhm.
when you lead people astray, you are more accountable for leading them astray. And so, but it is a power that we have to use. And I am of the opinion that it's all going to go in the right direction. I see, as information technology becomes more ubiquitous and information is more instantly recognizable, yes, we can be deceived, but we also have discerners. We each one of us are built with a truth detector, and we listen to credible
Mhm.
sources and argumentation, and then we look at information, and based on our own experiences, we compare what we see to what we have experienced, and we can filter too. And I think we tend to get closer, when we get more information, get closer to accuracy. So I think it's built in. God's designed us to progress forward. I mean, just look at the progression of different fields, right? We are moving in the right direction generally. It takes
Yeah.
concerted or coercive effort to push something in the wrong direction, and it happens on occasion, but I think overall we're moving positively in the right direction.
So how would you respond? I will say I'm kind of on the fence on this. I could be persuaded either way. I tend to be a little bit more skeptical that we're moving in a great direction. And this is the argument I would give. It's like, yes, I agree. You look at science and the technology, and over the past 400-ish years, yes, largely it has been used to advance. But there have been some pretty notable examples where this technology, or where the technology of the day, has been used for great evil. I think World War II, Germany and the Nazi regime, that there are examples, and these are not why those are not trivial is the level and the scale of what has happened. There's always good and bad. There's always going to be people who use it well, people who use it poor, but the scale with which you can do it grows larger in some sense. But I also think you could make an argument that a lot of that progress is predicated on a large scale exception to the Judeo-Christian worldview. And if we are genuinely seeing a degradation in society of the acceptance of the Judeo-Christian worldview, that may be we may be removing the check, or the machine that it allowed, or the basis by which that it allowed to grow forward. So if let's just say in 100 years, and I think this is unlikely, Western civilization has largely collapsed for whatever reason because of internal stuff, would you still be as optimistic about the technology that we're developing?
No,
No.
but it also wouldn't develop. It wouldn't continue to develop, right? Because when you
Mm,
go, and you told me this, you've said you go back through all the big names that have made the biggest, most influential contributions to progress in science and in many fields, and just
mm,
about all the list is populated by believing Christians, right? It's very, very populated by people pursuing these things because they love God and they want to explore creation and they want to boil
mm,
down. And this is a fascination, but it's driven by an internal love for God. And you go to other cultures that have not made those kinds of
mm.
contributions. We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Christendom. So I think the premise, if Western society collapses, it's not going to. And I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying about, we have seen a decline in, when you say society, we're talking about Western society,
Yes, that's correct.
a United States of America, and a Christian nation. When they were founded, 50 of the 55 signers of the Constitution were believing, Protestants, right? And
Well, and
now today,
I would include Europe in that as well, because
oh
that's
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. I know what you mean,
yeah.
but because we've seen a decline over a period of time, that's not the whole world. Christianity
That's
is actually expanding in a lot of places rapidly. So in total, Christianity is still expanding and growing. And we're seeing this next generation becoming more religious. The young
that's a fair point. Yeah.
under 40 are
Mhm.
turning back. They're turning back to the church, and Roe versus Wade is thrown out. We're seeing these things that we would never think. We thought, oh, it's all going to heck. all going to HE double hockey sticks.
Right.
You know, it's all going down, but it's not. God is in control, and there are cycles. So,
No, that's a
in the
good
last
point.
10 seconds, I'll turn it
Yeah.
over to you to refute.
No, I appreciate the point. I think there's a lot of weight in that. So I'll let you have the final word.
Jeff, it's always too quick, but I promise next time on a Friday when I'm at UCLA, I'll be, hey, Jeff, let's go. I don't know. Maybe you can concoct an alcoholic beverage in your laboratory, and we'll, instead of going out to a bar, no, just kidding. I don't know where I was going with that, but Jeff, I love you, and I'm grateful to have you in my life. And I'll report to you after Saturday's event how it went, and then you'll be jealous, and you'll be at the next one. Just kidding.
Sounds good.
Bye, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. See you next time.